is a virtue.
Question number 10, Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment and asks, will proposed changes to the Resource Management Act 1991 safeguard the life-supporting capacity of air, water, soil and ecosystems as the Act requires? If so, how?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Yes, because it's National's long-standing policy not to change Section 5, which specifically refers to the safeguarding the life-supporting capacity of air, water, soil and ecosystems.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Eugenie Sage.
Will his changes to the RMA improve water quality, given the results in today's Environment Aotearoa 2015 report that show total nitrogen levels have increased at 60% of the monitored river sites?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the first thing I'd point out is the figure that the member uses is not accurate. It was not accepted by the government statistician because the data around swimming water quality is not of that standard, and that party repeatedly misuses data that both the Chief Statistician and the Secretary for the Environment says does not match up. Now, this government does view water quality as a serious issue. That is why we introduced the first national policy statement under the RMA requiring improvements in freshwater quality. In the changes that we are proposing, we're also intending to implement National's policy of requiring all cattle stock to be fenced off from waterways.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Eugenie Sage.
My question was about total nitrogen, not about E. coli levels.
Order. The question was adequately addressed. It was also started earlier than that with what changes, will the change to the RMA improve water quality? Question was addressed.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Eugenie Sage.
Can he assure the House that the forthcoming RMA changes won't harm the environment when previous changes have resulted in the loss of landmark trees in Auckland, such as this giant Pahutakawa, which has become this?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the government's changes to the Resource Management Act will streamline and simplify it for the very reasons that are covered in the Productivity Commission published today, that points out how that Act is actually undermining the capacity for average Kiwi families to be able to access to an affordable home. In terms of issues around specific trees, I would point out that it is up to councils, for instance in the case of some of the specific tree issues in Auckland, to make decisions about what have the status of being protected trees and what trees they may decide to allow to be removed.
Supplementary question, David Seymour.
Does the Minister anticipate the reforms will increase the supply elasticity of housing and therefore help alleviate child poverty?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable
Mr Speaker, absolutely. If we look at the Productivity Commission report today, it shows that the price of land in Auckland has increased by fivefold. And if any member of this House is serious about the issues of family poverty and about increasing the affordability of houses, then we have to deal with the very high cost of land that is driving up housing costs. Now, the member questions across the House, what have we done about it? We have done the special housing areas as a short-term measure opposed by that member, and that when that legislation expires next October, we need to follow it on with further RMA reforms.
True.
Supplementary question, Eugenie Sage.
Will the next set of RMA changes increase the protection for our Indigenous habitats and wildlife when his proposed national policy statement on plantation forestry allows Indigenous vegetation and habitats to be cleared and replaced with pine?
Speaker.
The Honourable Dr.
Mr Speaker, I don't accept the member's assertions around the national environment standard that is proposed for forestry. It does not make sense for that industry to have different rules in every part of the country. Forestry is an important industry for New Zealand, and I'm satisfied that that proposed national environment standard will both improve the environmental standards. In some areas it involves a substantive step up on the environmental rules, as well as reducing the compliance costs from the hundreds of consents that are currently required for the forestry industry.
Supplementary question. I'll take the point of order first. Point of order, Eugenie Sage.
I seek leave to table a report from the Ministry for the Environment and the Government Statistician showing that total nitrogen has increased at 60%
Order. That
of
information will be very available to members. Supplementary question, David Seymour.
Does the Minister believe that conservation should be based on robust science? And if so, what is the scientific basis for retaining clauses such as, quote, the ethic of stewardship, the maintenance and enhancement of amenity values and intrinsic values of ecosystems in sections 6 and 7 of the RMA?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith, either of those two supplementary questions.
Mr Speaker, the government has made plain that it does not wish to make any changes to section 5 in the original primary question. It is the government's view that there are significant improvements that can be made to section 6 and section 7. There are a range of views across different parties in this parliament. My hope is being able to secure a majority so that we can make sensible changes to those sections that will both protect the environment but also enable New Zealand to grow and to prosper.
Question number 11, Joanne Hayes on behalf of Matt Ducey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On behalf of the member of Waimakariri, Matt Ducey, to the Minister for Canterbury Earthquake Recovery, what recent announcements have been made on the development of key anchor projects